All right, so we have a really fascinating stack of notes to go through today for this deep dive. Our mission is to take some pretty dense theological and philosophical material and translate it into a clear roadmap for you.
Yeah, and it is dense. We are looking at the writings of a 20th century thinker named Ghulam Ahmed Parvez, specifically his lessons on the Quran and his preface to Quranic study, which is called the Tamheed.
Great, and I want to start today out with a mental image. It is a simple one, maybe even a little nostalgic, but if the source material we have in front of us is correct, then this single image basically explains the entire human condition, from our biggest failures to our highest potential.
Okay, well, I am intrigued. Set the scene for us.
Picture a barnyard, classic farm setting. You have a hen, and underneath that hen, a clutch of eggs has just hatched. But here's the plot twist. One of those eggs wasn't a chicken egg, it was a duck egg.
The classic ugly duckling scenario.
Yeah, but forget the ugly part for a second. Like, forget the social ostracization stuff. I want you to focus purely on the behavior here. The hen takes her new babies to the edge of a pond. The chicks are naturally terrified. They stare at the water, they back away, they chirp in distress. But that one little duckling, it has never seen water before in its life.
It just has zero experience.
Zero. It has no idea what buoyancy is. It hasn't taken a physics class. But what does it do?
It just jumps right in.
It jumps in. And not only does it jump in, but it paddles. It stays afloat. It navigates. It didn't need a swimming lesson from the other ducks. It didn't need a manual titled Hydrodynamics for Waterfowl. It just functioned. It knew exactly what to do.
Right, because the software, so to speak, was pre-installed.
Exactly. And that is exactly where we are starting today. We are diving into a text that argues that this specific difference, the difference between the duckling that inherently knows and the human that doesn't, is the absolute key to understanding free will and the purpose of religion, and why human history is essentially a long list of people making terrible decisions.
It is a heavy topic, but a really fascinating one. Because, frankly, having gone through these notes, this isn't your standard theological breakdown. Parvez really strips away the mysticism and looks at the underlying systems.
Yeah, this felt a lot more like reading a manual for a piece of complex machinery than a religious text. It felt engineered.
That is a great way to put it. His argument, which we are going to unpack today, is that for centuries we have been reading the map upside down. We have been obsessed with human nature, which, by the way, he says doesn't actually exist, and we've been trying to go back to God when the whole point is to move forward.
We're going to talk about what the text calls the instinct trap, why salvation might be the wrong goal entirely, and why the straight path isn't actually a path at all, but more of a highway system.
It is a radical rereading of what guidance actually means. It completely challenges the very definitions we usually use for faith.
So let's go back to that duckling. In the source material, the author uses this biological reality to redefine a word that quite honestly carries a whole lot of baggage. And that word is Wahi.
Wahi, yes. Usually when people hear that word, they immediately think revelation. They imagine an angel on a mountaintop or a burning bush. It is a very supernatural vertical image of the divine speaking to a chosen human.
But the notes point out that the Quran uses this exact same word, Wahi, for bees.
Bees the earth, the heavens the stars. The text explicitly says God sent Wahi to the bee to build its hive. Now we have to ask ourselves a logical question here. Is the bee receiving a scripture? Is there a tiny bee Bible tucked away somewhere in the honeycomb?
Right, like, thou shalt make honey. Thou shalt not sting unless provoked.
Exactly. Obviously not. So Parvez argues we have to look at the function of the word in that specific context. For the bee, Wahi isn't a book. It is a command. It is a biological imperative.
It's instinct.
It is the operating system. He argues that in the natural world, Wahi is the programming pre-installed in the hardware.
Yeah.
Everything in the universe, from the orbit of a planet to the appetite of a lion to the migration of that little duckling, is following a specific pre-programmed path.
This is what really struck me in the notes. He uses this concept to explain why nature seems so peaceful compared to human society. He says animals are compelled.
Correct. And this is a crucial distinction for you to grasp. A lion acts like a lion because it absolutely must. It has no capacity to be anything else. A lion cannot wake up, look at a gazelle, and have a sudden moral crisis.
Yeah.
It can't decide, I think I'm going to try veganism for ethical reasons today.
It physically and psychologically cannot do that. It is entirely locked into lion mode.
It is 100% obedient to the laws of its own nature. In Arabic, the word Muslim literally means one who submits. So the source argues that the stars, the trees, the animals, they are all Muslims in the pure linguistic sense. They submit to the law of nature. They cannot disobey it. A stone falls down and never chooses to fall up. Water flows downhill.
So the duckling swims because it has to. It is following an internal GPS that it didn't build and that it cannot turn off.
Precisely. And because of that, the duckling is safe. It doesn't need a teacher. It doesn't need to worry about making the wrong choice and drowning. The safety net is built right in. It is guided by Wahi in the form of instinct.
But then we get to us, the humans.
The great exception.
The notes argue that humans are the only thing in the known universe that does not have this fixed programming. We seem to have totally missed the software update.
That is the core of his entire thesis, and he backs it up with the source text. He points out that the Quran describes man with some very specific and frankly uncomplimentary adjectives. It says man is created weak, hasty, ungrateful, and prone to being niggardly.
I remember reading that list and thinking, wow, thanks for the confidence boost. It feels like a harsh critique of our design.
But the author argues it is not a critique at all. It was a technical specification. Think about it. Why are we weak? Because we aren't born knowing how to survive. A foal stands up minutes after birth. A human baby is helpless for years. Why are we hasty? Because we have to make decisions, and we often lack the data to make the right ones, so we rush.
So these aren't insults, they are descriptions of a blank slate.
Exactly. We aren't born with a pre-installed program that forces us to be good. We aren't born with a program that forces us to be bad either. We are just open. We are potential energy.
We are at a junction.
The notes use the term najdain, which means the two high grounds, or the two possibilities. Unlike the lion who has exactly one path, which is to eat meat, the human stands at a crossroad, we have the choice. We can take the high road or we can take the low road.
And that choice is the problem.
It is the problem and the potential. This is the instinct trap. We look at nature and think, oh, everything flows so smoothly. The birds chirp, the rivers flow. Why is my life such a chaotic mess? And the text is essentially saying, your life is a mess because you are the only entity in the universe driving the car without the autopilot turned on.
The duckling has autopilot. We have manual transmission.
And we are really grinding the gears.
This leads to a somewhat terrifying conclusion in the notes. Parwez argues that if a human is left alone, solely to their own devices, without any external guidance, they won't naturally find the right path. The whole noble savage idea that we are naturally inherently good, he completely rejects that.
He does. He cites verses stating that if man is left to himself, he becomes an oppressor. He becomes ignorant. He destroys himself.
Because we have the power to destroy in a way that animals just don't. A tiger kills to eat. A human kills for ideology or for greed or just for fun.
Right. A tiger never kills more than it needs to survive. A human can invent an atomic bomb and wipe out an entire city for a theoretical reason. That capacity for infinite destruction is the exact flip side of our capacity for infinite choice.
So let's follow the logic the source is laying out here. God created the duckling with an internal GPS, instinct. God created the human without the internal GPS so that we could be free. But being free is incredibly dangerous. So what is this solution?
The solution, according to the author, is the external map. Since God didn't put the software inside us, which would make us robots, he provided the software outside of us. That is the new definition of revelation or Wahi for humans. It is the manual for the machine that didn't come with one.
I really like that analogy. It shifts the entire view of Scripture from a list of arbitrary rules to make God happy to an operating manual designed to keep you from crashing your life.
Exactly. It is utilitarian in the highest sense. It is about survival and function. And this brings us to a huge philosophical pivot point in these notes. We have been talking about biology, but the author takes a massive swing at philosophy too. You mentioned human nature earlier. I feel like that is a phrase we use constantly in our daily lives. Oh, war is just human nature. Greed is human nature.
Boys will be boys.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate excuse. But Parwez, he absolutely hates that phrase.
Really? Why? It seems pretty standard.
He considers it a contamination, a hangover from Greek philosophy that basically infected Islamic thought over the centuries.
Okay, let's unpack that. Why is human nature a dirty word in this particular deep dive?
Well, think about the Greek philosophers, Plato, Aristotle. They viewed the world in terms of fixed essences. A stone is a stone. Its nature is to be hard and heavy. A tree is a tree. A slave is a slave.
Right. Essentialism. Things just are what they are.
If you apply that to humans, if you say there is such a thing as human nature, you are implying that humans have a fixed, unchangeable state, just like the stone.
And if my nature is fixed,
then you can't really change. And if you can't change, do you actually have free will? If it is my nature to be angry, I can't help it. It is my hardwiring.
It becomes a deterministic trap. I am just built this way, so I can't be held accountable.
Exactly. It absolves you of all responsibility. Parwez argues the Quranic view is that there is absolutely no human nature. There's only a human self. And that self is capable of infinite change.
No human nature, just a human self. What is the practical difference there for you and me?
The difference is malleability. He points to the sheer variety in humanity. You have Mother Teresa and you have Jack the Ripper. You have saints and you have serial killers. If we had a fixed nature like a lion, we would all act roughly the same. All lions act like lions. But humans, we are the only species where individuals are radically, vastly different from one another.
That is true. You don't see a pacifist lion arguing with a warmonger lion. They're just lions doing lion things.
Precisely. So the notes argue that applying the term nature to humans is a fundamental category error. It denies the very thing that makes us human, which is the ability to rewrite our own software. We are not static statues. We are processes. We are constantly becoming something else.
This connects to another big concept in the notes that I found really mind-bending. Time. Or specifically, the actual shape of our journey.
The circle versus the line.
Yeah. Culturally, we are very used to the circle of life concept.
It is a very ancient and very pervasive idea. You find it in Greek thought, you find it in Hinduism with reincarnation, and the author argues it crept into Islamic Sufism too over time.
What is the circle view exactly? Break that down.
The basic narrative goes like this. You start with God or the one or the source. The soul separates from that source. It comes down to this dirty material world. It gets trapped in the mud of the physical body. The entire goal of life is to clean off the mud, escape the material world, and return to exactly where you started.
From dust we came to dust, we return. Or the drop of water returning to the ocean.
As you were. That is the phrase the notes use. The goal is just to get back to the starting line. Parwez calls this cyclic movement. You are like a bull in an oil mill, walking in circles all day and ending up exactly where you began.
And he says this is wrong.
He says it is entirely antithetical to the Quranic worldview. He argues the view is evolutionary, not cyclic. It is a straight line moving upward. You aren't trying to go back. You're trying to become something entirely new.
That is a huge shift in perspective. If I am not trying to go back, what am I actually doing?
You are growing. He uses a specific linguistic distinction here that I think is brilliant. He contrasts najat with Falah.
Okay, definitions, please.
Najat is usually translated as salvation. But literally in Arabic, it means rescue or escape. If you fall into a pit, you need najat. You need to be pulled out so you can go back to being safe on the solid ground.
Okay, so salvation implies you are in trouble and need to be put back where you were before the trouble started.
Right. It implies that the world itself is a trap or a mistake. But the author points out the text prefers the word falah. You hear it in the call to prayer. Hayya ala falah, come to success.
I always just thought that meant strictly success, like doing well in life or business.
It is much deeper than that. Falah is originally an agricultural term. It comes from the root describing a farmer splitting the ground so a seed can grow. It implies breaking open, blooming, achieving something that wasn't there before.
Oh, I see the difference now. When a farmer grows corn, he isn't rescuing the seed.
No, he is transforming it. The corn stalk is not the same as the seed. It has evolved. It has achieved a new state of being. Parwez argues that the purpose of life isn't to escape the world for salvation, but to conquer the self and the world to develop into a higher form of life. That is achievement.
So we aren't drops of water trying to dissolve back into the ocean and lose our identity. We are seeds trying to become trees.
Yes. And that means our individuality is not a mistake that needs to be erased. It is a project that needs to be developed.
That is really empowering. But also it makes a lot more sense. It explains why we are here at all. If the goal was just to go back, why leave in the first place? It makes creation seem like a completely pointless commute.
That is his ultimate critique of the cyclic view. It turns life into a cosmic game of hide and seek with absolutely no winner. The notes argue creation has a distinct purpose. The development of an evolved self that can survive death, not by emerging back into the divine, but by becoming a robust, independent personality that aligns with those divine attributes.
Okay, so if we are on a journey forward and not a circle backward, we clearly need a road. And this brings us to a phrase that, again, I thought I totally understood until I read these notes. Surah Al-Mustaqim.
The straight path.
Right. Show us the straight path. It is right there in the opening chapter of the Quran.
It is the standard translation, but the author, being the linguist he is, stops us right there. He says straight path is a bit lazy. It misses the physical posture of the word.
How so?
He breaks down the word mustaqim, comes from the root qiyam. To stand. To stand up.
Like stand up straight.
Like standing tall.
Right.
Like establishing balance. A line can be perfectly straight but lying flat on the ground. Mustaqim implies a path that retains its balance, that has no ups and downs, that allows you to walk upright without stumbling or falling over.
So it is more like the balanced, upright high road.
He uses the analogy of a highway, specifically the Great Trunk Road or the GTR.
I love that he uses the GTR. For those who don't know, that is the massive historical highway crossing India and Pakistan.
It really grounds the metaphor. Imagine a massive highway that cuts across the entire landscape. It is distinct. It is elevated. It is clear. That is the Sirat.
Okay.
But then there are the Sabul, the approach roads.
Like the on-ramps.
The on-ramps, the service lanes, the little dirt paths that lead to the highway. Parwez makes a crucial distinction here that solves a lot of modern theological headaches. He says there's only one highway.
Yeah.
One set of universal, unchanging values. Truth, justice, balance, protection of the weak. These are the Sirat. They never, ever change.
Truth is truth in the 7th century, and it's still truth in the 21st century.
Exactly. But the Sabul, the ways we approach that highway, the specific methods, the minor laws, those can and absolutely must change.
Well, this is really interesting, because usually people think religious law is completely set in stone forever.
The author argues that's the fatal mistake. He says the text gives the highway, which are the principles, and it gives the boundaries, but it leads the approach roads, the specific laws of a state or society, to be decided by humans based on their specific era.
Can we make this concrete? Give me an example from the notes.
Take justice for prisoners of war. That is the highway. You must treat them with justice. That is the permanent value.
Right.
In the 7th century, the approach road, the specific law, might have been to distribute them among families because there were literally no prisons. That was the most humane method available at that time to achieve justice.
Okay.
But in the 21st century with the Geneva Convention, the approach road looks entirely different. We have different systems. We have facilities.
So if you try to force the 7th century specific law onto the 21st century,
you might actually be violating the principle of justice. If you distribute prisoners to families today, that might lead to abuse or complete chaos. It wouldn't be justice anymore.
wow.
The notes warn that if you confuse the Subul, which are the changing paths, with the Sirat, which is the unchanging highway, you get stagnation. You try to force the past onto the present, thinking you're being pious, when really you're just being anachronistic.
That strictly separates the values which are permanent from the mechanisms which are temporary. That is a very modern way to look at legal theory.
It is constitutionalism. The Constitution gives the broad values. The legislature writes the specific laws for the time. Parwez sees the source text as the Constitution, not just a rigid penal code.
I want to touch on one more definition he completely flips in this section. Taqwa.
Ah, yes. The big one? Usually translated as fear of God or piety.
Right. Being afraid of smiting, walking on eggshells all the time.
The text goes to a story about Umar bin Khattab, the second caliph, to define this. The notes describe a scenario. You are walking through a dense, thorny forest path. You are wearing long, flowing robes. What do?
Well, I don't want to rip my clothes, so I gather them up, I pull them close to my body, and I walk really carefully.
That specific action, gathering your robe to protect it from the thorns, that is taqwa.
So it is not fear.
It is vigilance. It is protection. It is mindfulness. You aren't afraid of the path itself. You are navigating it. You are protecting yourself, your robe, from the thorns of life, which are greed, envy, destruction.
That is a much more active and empowering image. It is not cowering in a corner, praying not to get hit. It is walking through a dangerous jungle with absolute focus.
Keep diving deep and watch out for the thorns, as we said in the intro. Life is the thorny path. The entire goal is to get to the destination with your robe intact. That is what taqwa actually means.
I love that. Okay, so we have the highway. We have the car, which is the self, but how do we actually navigate? This leads us to the 2 books theory in the notes.
This is where the author attempts to reconcile science and religion, which, let's be honest, are usually positioned as mortal enemies.
Or at least separate magisteria, right? Like you stay in your lab and I will stay in my church and we just won't talk.
Parwez argues there are actually 2 volumes of the exact same series. Book 1 is the Book of Nature. Book 2 is the Book of Revelation.
Book 1 is the universe itself.
Yes, the work of God. Science is simply the act of reading Book 1. When a scientist studies gravity or biology or astronomy, they are studying the habits of God. They are decoding the laws of nature.
And Book 2.
The Word of God, the Quran. This deals with the laws of human personality, values, morality,
So
sociology.
the notes have a very stark warning about what happens if you try to separate these two books.
It is the secular trap versus the religious trap. The author argues if a nation reads Book 1 science, but completely ignores Book 2 moral values, what happens?
You get really good technology, but you might use it for really bad things.
You get power without direction. You get the atomic bomb dropped on cities. You get industrial slaughter. You get hell on earth. You master matter, but you completely destroy the spirit.
Okay, and the flip side. What if you read Book 2 Revelation, but ignore Book 1 science?
You get the current state of much of the traditional religious world. You get pious poverty. You might have great values internally, but you are weak. You are dependent. You become completely irrelevant on the world stage because you cannot harness the forces of nature.
So the religious folks are sitting in the dark, praying for light, while the scientific folks have invented the light bulb, but might use it to build a torture chamber.
That is a dark but highly accurate summary of his point. He says true success, Falah, that blooming we talked about earlier, requires mastering both. You absolutely need the power of science from Book 1, guided by the moral compass of revelation from Book 2.
He even goes so far as to call separating them kufr.
Yes, which is a very strong word, usually translated as disbelief. But here he points out the root means covering up the truth. If you ignore half of God's library, you're quite literally denying reality.
This brings us to the toolbox. We know we need to read Book 2 alongside Book 1, but the notes claim we have been reading Book 2 wrong for 1,000 years.
This is the highly controversial part of his thesis, the critique of history.
He starts by asking a simple question. Why Arabic?
Right. Why was the text revealed in Arabic? Was it just a coincidence because the prophet was an Arab? The author says that is part of it, sure, but there is a profound linguistic reason. He argues that classical Arabic is a uniquely stable language.
Stable. What does stable mean in this linguistic context?
It is built on root words. We can call them the Legos of the language.
Walk me through these Legos.
In Arabic, most words come from a three-letter root. Take KTB. Anything to do with writing comes from this root. Kitab is book, katib is writer, maktab is office. Even if the superficial meaning shifts slightly over time, the core DNA of the concept is preserved in those three letters.
So you can always trace the meaning back to its origin.
Exactly. The source notes that at the time of revelation, Arabic was uniquely vast and precise. It mentions that while European languages had very few root concepts, Arabic had thousands. It was essentially capable of holding complex legal and philosophical codes without the meaning drifting too much.
But the meanings did drift, right? I mean, that is his whole point.
They drifted because of history. Parwez argues that after the Prophet Islam spread incredibly rapidly, it absorbed Persian cultures, Roman cultures, Greek philosophies. And slowly, the meanings of those original Quranic words started to change to fit the new cultures.
The cyclic idea creeping in again.
Exactly. Words that originally meant revolution started meaning ritual. Words that meant a state system started meaning priesthood. The author says that for the last 1,000 years, people haven't been reading the text directly. They've been reading tafsir commentaries about the text.
They are reading the cliff notes written by guys who lived 300 years later.
Specifically, he targets the history books and traditional exegesis, like Tabari and the Hadith collections of Bukhari.
Whoa, Bukhari is usually considered the absolute gold standard in orthodoxy.
In traditional orthodoxy, yes. But the author takes a critical historian's approach here. He points out these were compiled centuries after the fact. They're based entirely on oral traditions. I heard from a guy who heard from a guy.
The ultimate telephone game.
And he argues that during that telephone game, Persian Zoroastrian and Jewish ideas infiltrated the system. He suggests these historical accounts are exactly what turned the dynamic, forward-moving highway into a static cyclic religion based on rituals. Now, obviously, that is a very specific historical viewpoint the author holds, but it is central to his argument.
So his solution isn't to interpret the text metaphorically. His solution is to literally go back to the dictionary.
Literally. The Dictionary Project. He spent years compiling a dictionary called Lughat ul-Quran. His method was to say, forget what Tabari said in the 9th century. How did an Arab Bedouin use this specific word in the 7th century?
He just wants to bypass the middlemen entirely.
Bypass the middlemen, strip away the historical accretions, and plug the Book of Revelation directly into the Book of Nature.
That is a massive undertaking.
It is, and it leads to a completely different version of faith based on these notes, one that values intellect, science, and progress rather than tradition, ritual, and resignation.
So we have gone from ducklings that swim by instinct to humans who have to build their own highway. We have gone from a circle that goes nowhere to a straight line that goes to the stars.
And we have gone from saving our souls to building ourselves.
It really redefines the entire burden of being human. It is not about following rules just to avoid punishment. It is about taking full responsibility for your own evolution.
That is the provocative thought to end on today. The source text mentions that the Quran invites tadabbur,
Tadabbur, deep thinking.
critical thinking. The notes say this challenge is for everyone, not just scholars with big beards, you, the listener. The challenge is, can you strip away the idols of the mind? Can you look at your beliefs, whether you are religious, atheist, secular, and ask, is this really true? Or is this just what I was told by history?
Are you swimming because you actually know how, or are you just floating because everyone else is floating?
Exactly. The destination isn't salvation escaping the world. It is success conquering the self and the world to build something higher.
Well, on that note, I'm going to go check my internal GPS. It might need a serious software update.
Just remember to watch out for the thorns on the path.
Wait, before we cut the feed, I need to circle back to something. We breezed past the Book of Nature thing, but I feel like there's a nugget there we totally missed.
Which part? The conflict between science and religion.
No, the unity of it. You said the author calls it two books, but in the notes he uses a specific phrase, the work of God and the word of God.
Yes, he does.
And he says they cannot contradict.
Right. This is a fundamental epistemological stance for him. If God created the universe, which is the work, and God revealed the text, which is the word, they have the exact same author. An author doesn't write a book that fundamentally contradicts his own life's work.
So if we find a contradiction...
If science says the earth is billions of years old, and your interpretation of scripture says the earth is 6,000 years old, the author would say your interpretation is objectively wrong.
He wouldn't say science is wrong.
No, because science is observing the work of God directly. You can't deny the physical work to save your historical understanding of the word. You have to go back to the word and ask, did I misunderstand the metaphor? Did I rely on a bad translation from the Middle Ages?
That is remarkably modern. It essentially gives science a veto power over traditional superstition.
It forces religion to remain rational. It forces the believer to constantly update their understanding of the text as their understanding of the universe expands.
And that connects right back to the why Arabic point. The notes mention something about scientific language.
Yes, the author claims that the Quranic language is inherently scientific in its precision. He mentions that even though it was revealed in a very poetic era, the structure of those root words allows for meanings to expand as human knowledge expands.
Can you give me an example of that from the notes?
The notes mention the verse about the expansion of the universe. The word used is musin. In the 7th century, they might have understood it metaphorically as God is generous or God makes things vast, but the root implies literal physical expansion, literal widening. So when Hubble discovers the universe is physically expanding, the Quranic word fits perfectly without needing to be twisted at all.
So the Book of Revelation was basically waiting for the Book of Nature to catch up.
Exactly. And that is why he is so obsessed with the Dictionary Project. He believes the answers are in the roots buried under layers of medieval history.
It is like archaeology for ideas.
Linguistic archaeology. Digging through the sand of human tradition to find the solid rock of the original meaning.
Let's talk about the duckling one more time. I just cannot get that image out of my head. The notes say animals are Muslim by nature.
Yes. Lowercase m Muslim.
Meaning submitter.
Right. As we said, Islam simply means submission to a set of laws. The sun submits to gravity, it is a Muslim. The bee submits to instinct, it is a Muslim. They are in perfect harmony with the Creator's law.
But they don't get any credit for it.
Exactly. You don't give a medal to a stone for falling down. Good job, stone. You obeyed gravity today. It had absolutely no choice.
So human Islam, human submission is entirely different.
It is voluntary Islam. That is the only thing that actually counts in this framework. If you are forced to be good, like a robot or a prisoner, it has zero moral value. Moral value only exists when you could choose the thorns, but you actively choose to protect your robe.
This perfectly explains the Najdain, the two paths concept. God had to allow evil to exist.
He had to. The notes are very clear on this. If God wanted everyone to be good automatically, he could have just made us like the angels or the bees. But he wanted a creature that chooses him. And to choose him, you must have the very real option to reject him.
So the mess of the world, the wars, the crime, the hate, that is just the price of admission for free will.
It is the collateral damage of freedom. And the project of the text, according to Parwez, is to teach humans how to use that freedom to build a society that is better than the bee's hive. Because it is built on conscious choice, love, and reason, not just biological programming.
That brings us to the self. The notes mention that the self is an indivisible unit.
Yes, this is a massive pushback against the mystics. The mystics often say the self is a piece or a part of God, and it naturally wants to merge back, like that drop of water.
Right.
The author says no. The self is a unique creation. It is an indivisible unit. It isn't a part of anything. It is you.
And it is meant to survive.
It is meant to solidify. He uses the term crystallize. The goal of life is to strengthen the self through good action, through Falah, so that it becomes strong enough to survive the profound shock of death.
And if you don't,
if you live a life of kufra, of covering the truth, of following your base desires, of ignoring the highway, your self remains weak. It remains undeveloped. And an undeveloped self simply fails to survive. Or it exists in a perpetual state of regret and stunted growth.
that is what hell is. Stunted growth.
In this specific interpretation, yes. Heaven is the evolutionary future of the developed self. Hell is the evolutionary dustbin for the failed self.
That is incredibly high stakes.
It's extremely high stakes. It moves religion entirely from ritual appeasement like doing a dance to make the gods happy to natural law.
Right.
If you put your hand in fire, it burns. Not because the fire god is angry at you, but because that is the physical law of fire. If you live a life of greed and hate yourself, degenerates. Not because God is vindictive, but because that is the psychological law of the self.
It makes it a completely cause and effect universe.
A rational universe. Which brings us right back to the Great Trunk Road.
It's the GTR, the analogy of the road versus the traffic laws.
All right, the din, which is the system, versus the Sharia, which is the path or the law.
This is a huge point of contention in the Muslim world, isn't it?
It is the central debate. Most Orthodox scholars say Sharia is fixed. God said it, you do it forever, end of story. The author says God gave the values like justice. But the law, how to achieve that justice, depends entirely on the time and place.
So to go back to our example, in the 7th century, maybe this specific law was cut the hand of the thief.
Right. In a desert society with no prisons, no police force, and where stealing a camel literally meant a family starved to death, that was the harsh deterrent needed to maintain the value of security. But the author asks, is cutting the hand the highway? Or is it just the approach road?
He would say it is definitely the approach road.
Exactly. The highway is stop crime or protect property. Today we have prisons, we have surveillance, we have social safety nets. If we can achieve protect property without cutting hands, we're still following the highway.
So sticking to the old law could actually be breaking the religious principle if it no longer serves the ultimate goal.
Exactly. If cutting a hand today leads to a society that looks barbaric and unjust to the world, you have violated the permanent value of justice. You have stayed on the old approach road and driven your car right into a swamp.
That requires a lot of confidence. To look at a historical text and say, I know the principle behind this rule is more important than the literal rule itself.
It requires tadabbur, thinking.
We just keep coming back to that word.
We do, because it is the ultimate antidote to the instinct trap. The bee doesn't need tadabbur. It just builds the hive. Humans must think. If we stop thinking, we fall off the highway.
The notes mention Tabari and Bukhari again in this context.
Yes, the history problem.
The author seems to think that we started worshiping history instead of the book.
He argues that we made the interpretations of the past into idols. We look at how the early Muslims lived and say we must dress exactly like them, eat exactly like them, brush our teeth exactly like them. He calls this ancestor worship disguised as piety.
And he says that is not following the text.
He says the text tells you to move forward, to evolve. If you are trying to perfectly mimic the 7th century, you're moving backward. You're trying to turn the line into a circle again.
As you were.
As you were. He says the early Muslims were successful because they applied the text to their specific time. We will be successful only if we apply the text to our time.
So don't copy their specific answers. Copy their method of solving the problem.
Exactly. They were pioneers. We have just become museum curators.
Ouch. That stings a bit.
It is meant to sting. The Tamheed preface is written with a lot of passion. You can really feel his frustration. He sees a community that is sitting on a gold mine, the Book of Revelation, but is begging for pennies because they refuse to dig.
And they completely refuse to read the other book. The book of nature.
Right. He sees the West reading the book of nature and flying to the moon. He sees the Muslims kissing the book of Revelation and staying on the ground. He wants to merge the two. He essentially wants a space-age Islam.
Space-age Islam. I really like that framing.
It is the idea that your spiritual growth should perfectly match your technological growth.
So let's look at the dictionary he wrote one more time. Luhidul Quran. I want one more example of how his method changes things practically.
Okay. Take the words salat, usually translated as prayer.
Right? The 5 daily prayers, the physical ritual.
Parwez looks at the root, sad lamwa. In the dictionary of the time, it meant to follow closely, like a horse following the leader in a race, or connection. He argues that while the ritual is a part of it, the core meaning is to follow the divine system closely, to establish a social order that follows those permanent values.
So it is not just a private act you do alone in a room, it is a social duty.
It turns a private ritual into a massive public responsibility. Or take zakat, usually translated as charity or alms.
Right, giving a certain percentage of your wealth to the poor.
He looks at the root, ZKW. It means growth, purification, swelling. He argues zakat isn't just tossing a few coins to a beggar to feel good. It's a system of economic growth where resources circulate so that everyone in society can grow and bloom. Falah.
It turns it from basic charity into macroeconomics.
Exactly. He politicizes the terms in the best sense of the word. He turns them from religious hobbies into statecraft. He argues the text came to build a state, not a church.
A state, not a church. That is a really crucial distinction for the listener to grasp.
A church deals with private individual salvation. A state deals with public law, economics, justice, and war. The author argues the Quran is a constitution for a state.
But a state that doesn't force you?
A state that you consciously choose to join. A state based on the highway of values. The text literally says there is no compulsion in the system. La ikraha fid din.
So coming back to the individual listener, the person sitting there with their headphones on right now, they aren't running a state, they aren't writing a massive Arabic dictionary. What is the practical takeaway for them from all these notes?
The main takeaway is that you are not a duckling.
I am definitely not a duckling.
You don't have instinct to save you when you fall in the water. You have to make conscious choices. Every single day, you are standing at the Najdain, the crossroads. You can choose the path of instinct, which is greed, selfishness, laziness, the path of least resistance. Or you can choose the Sirat, the path of balance, the path of standing tall.
And that path requires actively reading both books.
It requires looking at the world science and reality and looking at your values, revelation, and conscience and aligning them constantly.
And it means you are not trying to go back to who you were yesterday.
No. You are building who you will be tomorrow. You are moving from a weak, hasty creature to a crystallized, balanced personality. That is Falah. That is achievement.
Do you find this view comforting, or is it just exhausting? Because honestly, the circle view is kind of cozy. I came from God. I go back to God. It's all good in the end. This linear view puts a whole lot of pressure on me.
It is exhausting. But the author would argue that cozy is for the womb. Cozy is for the grave. Real life is struggle, jihad. The notes mention that the text says we have created man in toil, kabad. Struggle is the literal mechanism of evolution. If you aren't struggling, you aren't growing.
So embrace the struggle.
Embrace the thorns, gather your robe, and just keep walking.
I think I seriously need to go buy a dictionary after this.
It certainly wouldn't hurt.
Well, thank you for guiding us through this stack of notes. It was incredibly dense material, but I feel like we stood up a little straighter today.
We definitely found the Surah.
We did. To our listeners, you have the map, you have the engine, now you just have to drive. This has been The Deep Dive. I am your host.
And I am the expert.
See you next time.
Goodbye.
Actually, wait, before we fully sign off, the notes had one little anecdote about a duckling hatched under a hen. I just really want to visualize that mother hen's face for a second.
The hen essentially represents tradition in his analogy.
Right, so the hen is looking at this baby and squawking, "Why are you going into the water? That's dangerous. We chickens don't do that."
And the duckling says, "But my nature tells me to jump."
For the duckling, the nature is correct. For the human, if the hen of tradition tells you, "Don't think, just follow blindly," you have to be the duckling that jumps into the water of knowledge anyway.
That is a really beautiful twist on the analogy. The hen of tradition will always be terrified of the ocean of reality. But the duckling of intellect knows it belongs out there.
We are heavily mixing our metaphors now.
We definitely are. But the core point stands. Don't let the hen tell you how to swim.
Words to live by. Don't let the hen tell you how to swim. Okay, now we are really done. Thanks for listening.
Take care.
Wait, I just realized something else from the notes. The Great Trunk Road analogy.
Yes.
The GTR goes from Calcutta to Peshawar, right?
Across the entire subcontinent, yes.
It passes through so many vastly different cultures. Bengalis, Biharis, Punjabis, Pathans. They all eat completely different foods, speak different languages, wear different clothes, but they are all driving on the exact same road.
That is the architectural beauty of this seant. It unifies diversity without destroying it. You don't have to stop being a Punjabi to be on the road. You just have to follow the universal traffic laws.
This connects back to the verse, we made you into nations and tribes so that you may know one another.
Exactly. Diversity is the intentional design. Unity is the functional goal. The circle view often tries to erase diversity, become one with the one. The highway view celebrates the diversity, travel together towards the one.
It is a convoy.
A caravan. The notes specifically use the word caravan, the caravan of humanity.
And everyone drives their own unique vehicle.
But we are all heading to the exact same destination. Falah.
Success.
Okay, I think we have successfully squeezed every single drop of juice out of this orange, or every mile out of this highway.
I think we have covered it well. It is amazing how much depth is packed into just a few verses, if you really take the time to look.
That is the miracle of the text. It expands as your intellect expands.
It is a reminder for the worlds.
Indeed.
Okay, for real this time. Signing off. Keep thinking, keep standing, keep driving.